I'd like to introduce Fraser McKenzie from David Reid Homes.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
We're lucky enough to be shooting this video today at the beautiful David Reid show home out here at Hanley's Farm. It's just stunning. So today, lucky Fraser and I are joined by Stuart Mitchell.
G'day.
Hi, how are you doing? Graham Todd, thanks for joining us, Graham.
Okay.
And Daniel Gibbons. Daniel, Graham and Stu are local industry experts, and they're going to be joining Fraser and I to discuss the buying land and build process here in Queenstown. So thanks for joining us, everyone, and let's fire away. So first question, everyone, is if I were an overseas buyer considering buying land and building here in Queenstown, where should I start?
Well, probably with me, Kate.
Okay.
First of all, you need to find out whether you can buy land in Queenstown, and if you're an overseas person, and basically you're limited to Australians and Singaporeans when you're talking about buying land.
Right.
There are some provisions where people can buy to build a new home, but then they've got to market that home for sale within a certain period of time. So unfortunately, the way the law stands at the moment, it's pretty limited.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I mean, so once you've kind of worked out that you can purchase here, I mean, that's obviously the right place to start, but there's a number of areas at the moment that are certainly getting more traction than others. There's where land is available, a lot around here in Hanley's Farm, Fraser, but you're also seeing quite a bit out at Jack's Point at the moment, aren't you?
Yes, big drive for Jack's Point, all round, even in Arrowtown, Glenorchy, surprisingly enough. They're also releasing some land out towards Kingston, so it's amazing what's coming on the market for the area, especially under the circumstances that we're in. They're releasing some more land just north of Hanley's Farm, so there is quite a few areas popping up. More what I'd probably possibly say is the first time home buyers, but then you've sort of got the standoff, one-off blocks as well, which you can find around town, which you've got access to them, Kate.
Yes, I do. And I've been finding certainly there's been a turn to land at the moment in Queenstown, especially after what's happened surrounding the world at the moment. Queenstown, I mean New Zealand in particularly, is a safe haven, and I think we've really benefited off that as a nation during this quite unusual time. Yeah.
It's been a huge increase with inquiries at the moment,
right,
like you were just saying, especially from overseas right now. And not necessarily are they always expats, but they are, someone who's either been here and have fallen in love and then realised they've been waiting for an opportunity to come through. And I think now could well be a good opportunity, especially with the inquiries that are coming across the board. And there is people hungry looking for work at the moment, so it's I would almost say the stars are almost aligning with that opportunity, because Queenstown does get too busy sometimes, makes it very challenging, especially when there's too much work on. People don't really know where they're going, it's just too crazy, but this time now I feel that there's a lot of good tradies that are available for work at the moment, so it is a good opportunity.
Great. I mean, and obviously a good place to start is with your solicitor and also having an agent, which is a bit of a point of contact, but David Reid Homes will also get involved in the early stages?
Yeah, probably that's a really good question there, Kate, because why it's a good question is we get a lot of people come to us after they've possibly purchased a section and that either they've got a budget in mind or a cost in mind that they want to build to. However, if you're building on a slopey section, the cost of building does go up, and if you're building two-storey, it does go up as well. So those little things you want to take in consideration. So sometimes it might not necessarily be the cheapest section is a good section. So if you're buying a slopey 45-degree rock face and it's a cheap section, it sounds cheap, it's for a reason. And the cost of the build could be, just for the excavation, could be 100 to 200 to 300, depending on what it is to get out of the ground. So I always look at it, so, however, if you do see another section, it might be a little bit more expensive, but it's a better positioning, easier sort of building conditions, you could say. That is sometimes worth buying that little bit better section, because you're going to get your money back with the investment that you're putting in, because the earthworks, you don't necessarily see that. So you'll see 300,000 plump straight into earthworks, and you don't know how much that actually costs, because the rock is transportation of the trucks taking the rock away. dumping fees, all these little things, and that also slows the build down.
All right, well let's change tact now. So say that their overseas buyers now sought the relevant advice, they've had a discussion with the agent and Fraser or the builder, and they've decided that they will be moving forward. What is the next stage from here legally? Is there a process that they need to start from this point, Graham?
Yeah, generally it's a pretty straightforward process in New Zealand buying land or buying property. We all use a standard form agreement for sale and purchase. We can add provisions to that which are bespoke for the person's circumstances, and they may be a due diligence clause, finance clause, those types of things to give people a bit of time to, if the market allows that time, because sometimes it doesn't, because you might be in a shootout for a property between two purchasers, and you've got to put your best foot forward. And so that's something that you've got to be conscious about. But go through that due diligence, get a land information memorandum, get the title searched, talk to a builder, and then probably the next person you're going to want to talk to is Stuart, as far as arranging finance.
Okay, well why don't we go
Perfect
from
timing.
there?
So I guess the first question I want to know is title issued? Because in Queenstown there's a lot of developments and sections that could be 12 months plus pending title. So the reason why that's important for me is that a bank will not issue finance and approve it if it's beyond 12 months before title is issued. And I would also say that given this post-COVID environment, especially for overseas, they probably don't want to do it 12 months out because things change so much. And even if we get finance in place 12 months out, every 90 days we reapply and update that finance. So I would be suggesting if title is not issued, you'd be talking to Graham about what's the risks here. We can't get finance in place. We've got to wait 6 months out. And Graham, from your perspective, given this post-COVID environment, are you finding clauses in contracts to protect clients on a COVID environment?
Yeah, what we're doing mainly around settlement, but also we are very conscious of the fact that in terms of banks, they are reviewing on a regular basis that person's ability to be able to service the loan, and also reviewing valuations and things like that as well. Yeah. And that's something that purchasers need to be aware of, that you may be able to get finance on day one, but that finance may not now be available on settlement, which may be, like you point out, 12 to 18 months down the track.
Yeah, so that's something you've got to be mindful of. It's a calculated risk. What we can do is, if title is quite further down the line, we do what we call a fact find, loan profiler, and we'll assess, look, based on today's policies and where you sit, this is how this looks and whether it works or not. And then we can say, look, this looks pretty comfortable. You can feel relatively comfortable. If nothing changes, you'll be okay. But if it's pretty tight, we make the client aware of that. Then they make a calculated decision as to whether they wish to proceed, or do they have a plan B where they've got alternative funding in the country they live, for example. So that's assuming title isn't issued. If title is issued, then we can do a full due diligence on not only where you are today, but highlighting to the client that, look, these are the things you must consider. So being financially strong in itself is not simply good enough. Banks, again, employed, self-employed. Now this is important to realise, is that you can be self-employed and earn fantastic money, but some banks' policies will not look at you if you are self-employed. Ridiculous, I know, but it is what it is. Income perspective, so the banks do expect stronger income with overseas investors, usually because what they'll do is they'll scale back that overseas income, net income, between 10 and 40%. Australian income is generally scaled back by 10%, but if you've got other currencies, you're looking up to 40%, which is a significant impact. So what they want to see usually is a minimum of $250,000, New Zealand dollars that is, by one of the people on the application. So that income must be stronger. The big issue can be around AML, anti-money laundering laws, and opening a bank account. So especially because now the borders are closed, some banks insist on you presenting yourself here, and you can't. Some may allow you to use an affiliate branch, some will let us do it remotely. So that in itself, every other box could be ticked, but if we can't get your bank account set up, because a major bank, you must have a bank account with them for them to lend you the money. could be the tipping point. So by having that chat with us at the initial outset, you can understand, right, is this viable? Is it something, worst case, I have to wait until I actually can arrive to the country to set up a bank account?
Okay, and Daniel, do you have anything to add here? I mean, there must be some tax advice that's certainly probably quite relevant at this point in the process.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we sort of like to do at this stage is just understand why you're buying the property, because I suppose my mind is always thinking, okay, what's going to happen down the line? What's your end point? It's always, is it an exit discussion? Are you going to rent it out? And the biggest reason for that is I want to get into the right place from the get-go. So if you're going to rent it out, what's the best ownership for you? Is it in your own names? Is it in a company? Is it other options? And there's a few trigger points with that. And probably the biggest question for that, and we talked to Toddy quite a lot about this, is around if you're going to sell it. We've got the bright line tax rules, which while we don't have capital gains tax, if you sell residential land within 5 years, you can be still subject to tax on that property. And so we want to get in the right place with the right funding. If you need to get interest deductibility, we get on the right entity with Stu, gets the deductibility right, all that sort of stuff. Another part with like the Fraser is if you're going to put, like for example, a unit on the side, you're going to rent that out, how do we structure that up so we get the maximum costs in there so that we get those deductions from a tax point of view. So it's just that real initial planning to know what you're trying to do with the property, so we get that done. Another part is also we need an ID number before you can settle. So, you know, sometimes we help with that, lawyers can do it as well. It's just making sure you've got all that stuff, because that, same as IML, we've got an AML for the ID as well. That's a bank account process. All this stuff takes time. So it's just that real basic planning to make sure we've got that right.
Yeah, I think what you're hearing is that it's very much a team situation. You need a team of advisors around you.
Yes, yeah.
And you need ones that have got experience, basically.
Definitely.
And you know, just mention about the entities, you know, from a lending perspective, it doesn't particularly matter, but we just need to know. So if it's a trust, we get a trust deed and names and addresses and date of birth of all the trustees. For a limited company, we need a registration number. So it doesn't particularly matter, but we will need to tick those boxes.
Yeah, and I mean, it's often at this point as well that your builder, particularly at David Reid Homes, can jump in as well and assist a bit more throughout the due diligence process. I mean, Fraser, you've been living here a long time, you know the area.
That helps.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Location is so important, especially for your design, because if you haven't lived in New Zealand, we actually live here, you try to build towards the sun. And I know if you're in Australia or somewhere else, you may be trying to build the opposite way because you don't want the sun in the house.
Very good point, yeah.
The other thing you've got to take in consideration is the wind. Queenstown is a little bit windy during certain times, so you want to take that into consideration with the design. So there's a lot of little things there just to be thinking about, you know, from your front door entranceway through to where's your living area of the house, through to the section that you're actually looking at buying, because it might look good on a piece of paper, aerial view, looks good, but then when you actually go and stand on the section, we'll look out and go, well, hang on a minute, someone's going to build a big house right in front of me, could do that, or someone's, you know, you've got to ask all these questions, because there's no point buying a nice beautiful section and someone can actually then develop something in front of you. So heaps of little snags, I would say, but if you ask the questions or you ask the right people, then that does help quite a bit.